Hi there. I've absolutely no idea what this chart actually means, but I think I understand what it's all on about. Uh, they say that if you want to know the answer to something, you have to ask the right questions. At any rate, I think the questions that people do ask reveal a lot more about the person asking the question than they do about either the answer or the question, really. And it seems to me that somebody who would ask, does God exist? Does heaven exist? Is there an afterlife? The word there is exist. That's a giveaway word. And and that word exist can be taken in four different ways, which we'll come on to in a minute. But the person asking this question, the questioner, the self-preserving part, the self-referencing, the self-destroying even, the self-creating, that would be the self that would ask the question to do with existence, because existence is what is of most concern to this particular aspect of self, which is to do with the finite worlds, the demiurge, and it's just there's some kind of residue transcendence there, or residue conscience. I suppose that's what the question is asking. Is asking, is there going to be any consciousness, I am consciousness, when I reach the transcendental state? In other words, I'm sitting here in my chair. When I'm sitting in heaven, will I be aware of heaven in the same way as I'm aware of sitting in this chair? That's the sort of question there, and we'll come on to the answer to that in a minute. But perhaps the spiritual self will be asking questions like, is all one? Am I that? Is God love? And that's got nothing to do with existence. These are questions which are spiritual questions. If I'm going to be hierarchical about it and say these are the higher questions and these are the lower questions, which I'm not quite sure that's kind of a fair thing to say, really. But anyway, for the purposes of convenience, I would say that is all one. These are the questions that basically a spiritual self would be invested in contemplating, because perhaps the answer to those questions gives you some idea of what existence would be like in the ineffable realm. And so that so basic. But then to go back to the question of existence, I mean, either God exists or does not exist, or perhaps the whole question of existence is neither of them is right. Is it neither exists nor exists, or both exists and does not exist? I can hardly imagine that both would be a particularly a logical statement to make. But neither exists nor does not exist. That might propel us into some kind of consciousness of the ineffable. Um, I'm not quite sure about that. I mean, the question perhaps that the self is not concerned with is its own annihilation, because that would be the annihilation of the ego. So I'm not sure that the spiritual self is terribly concerned about the issue of annihilation, because it doesn't even consider it an issue at all. So basically, it's all I can remember of this presentation that I was supposed to upload to this channel. I can't really remember what it was about. I think, as I say, it seems to me that the important thing to note, though, is that the questions you should be asking are basically, is all one? Am I that? Is God love? The other questions of existence, I mean, they are from a materialistic point of view. If you like, they're humanist, secularist questions, questions that a materialist would ask, because they are concerned with existence. They are concerned with the experience of existence. And you could say, well, why on earth not? Because surely that's the only experience that's worth having really. I mean, you want there to be some kind of residue materialistic experience for you to fully enjoy the delights of the ineffable. And if you're going to sort of change the goalposts and say, oh, well, these are not the questions that should concern us, the answers, are ambiguous. Whereas the answers to is all one, am I that, is God love, are more definite within the context of the ineffable. So I think that the point of this presentation is to simply say to you, ask the right questions. And in fact, it's the question. I mean, it's not a new concept in spirituality. It's the questions that you ask that is important, really, even more important than the answer. Well, I mean, the answer will just come. The answer will be obvious, I suppose, once you've asked the right question. It won't take much much thinking or experience on your part, because the answer will just pop into your mind, like a light bulb just lights up in your brain, and there it will be. And that is probably the connection with gnosis, is that if you the gnosis concerns the answer to these questions which I've got here, because they're not questions which are materialistic or mundane or belong in this world. They definitely belong. The answers belong in a different world, and the answers, in fact, will propel your spiritual consciousness into that ineffable realm. Whereas asking questions about existence will definitely not. So there could even be a functionality attached to the asking of these questions, am I that? Rather than questions about existence. There could be no function to asking these questions about existence. Does God exist? It might not be a question that serves any purpose whatsoever in this discussion, in this particular realm of ideas. So I would just say to you, well, be careful what questions you ask. And because if you're going to ask irrelevant questions, then the answers you're going to receive, if any, are going to be a complete waste of time, basically, and won't get you any further along the track towards gnosis.